Welcome to Agency Bites, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bites is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bites, a podcast for agency owners. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. I'm really pumped to be here with Justine Clay today. She's a speaker, writer, business coach, and ADHD life coach for creative entrepreneurs and professionals. Justine, thanks for joining me. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure's mine. I was really excited to get to talk to you. I know we've crossed paths a little bit in the past through some panels that we've been on together. But to be able to really dig into that beautiful brain of yours and really understand what you're doing and how you're helping, I'm excited. And I think the information is going to be super valuable.
Wonderful.
You want to start, kind of give us what's your background? How did you get into what you're doing now as a coach?
Yeah, sure. So I won't go all the way back to my life story, but you can probably hear I'm not from here. So I moved to New York City in 1996, sight unseen, with a man I'd been dating for a few months at the time of arriving. So it was kind of a wild adventure. And I fell into the creative industry. I worked for an art director who had just gone out on his own. He wanted someone just basically to manage his studio for him. I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't know anything about what he did. But I did know that I wanted to have a job that wasn't waitressing. So I started working with him. And that was kind of like my foray into, agencies, creative work, advertising, design, all of that stuff. So I worked with him, then I went on to work for his agent. So at that time, this is like 1997, agents did not represent creative folks outside of photographers, stylists, hair and makeup. That was pretty much the only folks who had representation. And she represented art directors, copywriters, creative directors, fashion illustrators. So really kind of like a unique niche. And so it was working with her over a period of 8 years that I really started to understand what it means to be an independent creative professional, a senior creative professional, what it meant to position yourself uniquely in the marketplace, what it meant to get new business, what it meant to write proposals, manage projects, build teams, all of that stuff. So the way we kind of were positioned was a virtual advertising agency. So we either worked directly with agencies or in-house groups on special projects. So oftentimes we were working with the brand, with the company, with their agency of record, with the in-house group. We were kind of like this sort of amorphous little task force that went in and worked on projects. And it was super fun and just really great. And just a real sort of boots on the ground education of sort of what the creative folks need to thrive and what the agencies and people, in-house groups that are hiring them need to see, hear, and experience to say yes, to their proposals. So I did that. You
really got pulled into it from both sides. The one-person shop that was remote at that time is crazy to think about, but yeah. And then the agencies that brought that team in, you got to experience from both sides. Great.
That's right. Yeah. So I was kind of like the middle person. And so my job was to make sure, and it's kind of interesting now looking back on it, both people were my clients. The creatives were my clients and the clients were my clients. And my job was to keep both people, not necessarily happy, but, moving forwards, right? So I did a lot of like that sort of finagling and conflict resolution and renegotiations of all of those things. And it's funny, I always felt a lot of responsibility to the client also. So sometimes a creative would say to me, you need to ask the client for more money. I want to gold leaf everything. And I'd say, nope, not going to do it. You said you'd do this. Figure out another way. I'm not going to just go ask them. And they say, it's your job to represent me. And I say, no, it's my job to facilitate this project. And there would be times where a client would ask for more, and I'd say, well, you have to pay more, or you have to give us more time. So I felt like I was always advocating for whoever needed advocating for in that relationship, which I just sort of like just intuitively chose that position, right? It wasn't always a popular one with the creatives, but there you go. We got the job done. So it did give me a kind of a unique insight into both sides of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you weren't trained as an account manager other than this trial by fire experience?
Exactly. And it's funny you say trial by fire, because the woman I worked for at the time was kind of, I'm trying to think of a way to say it, demanding, right? Like and exacting. It was her business, and she had an eye for all of the details. And I was like, 26, and I would be walking to work in the morning, and I was brand new off the boat, basically. And I would walk to work just like scared. I would be almost quaking in my boots, because it was just every day felt like you say, a trial by fire, because I didn't have any of the education. And I was sort of building the plane as I was taking off, which is, I think, ultimately, 20 plus years later, that has really sort of set me up to be able to support creatives who are also often building the plane after it's taken off, right? It's like, I feel like I've been there, and I understand what that feels like. So that was a really awesome sort of like comprehensive education in real time. And, in 2006, I started my own creative management agency. Of course, it was 2006 and 2008, the bottom fell out of that industry. And it was at that time that I came up with this kind of like sister business. It was like I was still doing both, where creatives were really getting laid off in droves, or they were freelance already and work just stopped overnight. And they just were freaking out. They didn't know what to do. And they were all beating a path to my door as an agent, thinking, oh, well, the agent will know what to do. She'll have a whole pile of jobs, And of course I didn't, but I did have time. And so anyone that wanted to speak to me, I said, come to my office. And, during that time of just listening to them and talking, I invariably helped them figure out what their unique value proposition was. I invariably helped them figure out who their ideal client was. I usually reworked their portfolio in real time in front of them, and then gave them a few contacts and said, here, go call these people. And they would leave my office completely transformed, not because they had the whole plan, but because they had the next steps. They had more clarity, and they had more courage.
Get some direction, and you gave them kind of some reassurance, like all hope is not lost. You've got some good work, some good experience. Pick yourself up here, go talk to so-and-so. Exactly. They had like the next few steps, which is really all any of us need. We don't need the whole pathway, we just need the next few steps. And so, as I was kind of sort of in my own business crisis, I just saw this opportunity of like, well, I'm having all these one-on-one conversations with people. What if I put together like a program of like basically how to be your own agent? That was essentially the positioning of that first thing. And, because I'm a Virgo rising, I like to take everything and put it into like, frameworks and actionable plans and modules. And so I just sort of looked at everything I did. I did a brain dump of everything I would do for someone as an agent, and then, bucketed it into teachable, actionable modules, from positioning to ideal client profiles to writing proposals to pricing and services, all of the stuff, which of course has evolved and morphed over the years. But that's how it started. It really started when my back was up against the ropes. Everyone else's back was up against the ropes. I was just trying to be of service, which we were talking about earlier, and just having conversations with anyone who asked me. And then just sort of having enough of the conversations of just like, there's something here, and it's a need that I can pretty easily fulfill. It took my time to come up with that program, of course. I mean, I probably spent the next 2 years building it out, or a year, at least a year. But it was just my labor. It wasn't an expensive thing to get off the ground, So in your business's current iteration, how long have you been doing this type of coaching? And you've always been working with creatives, mostly as like independent creatives, but the level or type of coaching you've been doing, has that been since this reiteration of these programs?
Yeah, since 2010. Yeah.
Wow.
So since 2010, and I've just been, refining and evolving the process and the client experience, obviously as a feedback loop, as the more people I coach, the more refined it all gets.
Yeah. I've had the pleasure of working with agency owners that have gone through your programming.
Oh, have you? I didn't know that.
And with amazing results, and the thoroughness with which you dig in and the feedback. And so I've gotten to see at some level some of the stuff that you work, some of the things that you work on with your clients. And I just think it's magical, and would highly recommend it to anybody who's looking for, how do I develop what some of these challenges are, and dig into it. But most recently, you've really leaned into the ADHD side of creative professionals. How recent has that been?
That has been probably the last couple of years professionally. How that happened was one of my sons has ADHD, and I'm neurotypical, and as I was sort of going through the process of just trying to understand his needs and how to better communicate and how to better get things done with him, I started to notice, I've got clients that have ADHD too. And some were telling me they had ADHD. Some were telling me they were in the process of getting a diagnosis. Other people did not have a diagnosis, but I was pretty sure they probably had it also. Which of course I wouldn't say to anybody. But I started to see, okay, there's this big overlap here. And when I was working with, my neurodivergent clients prior to taking a certification to becoming an ADHD coach, and really schooling myself in that area, I would always wonder, is this working as well as it could for them? Because I know that, like, for me, systems and processes and organizing and taking information is very easy to me. That's how my brain works. And so I think even without the added, expertise and awareness I now have, even without that, I think, we do well when we have a complementary brain working on our business, all of us, right? Like we can't be all of the things. So I think even at its most basic, that was probably helpful. But I always wondered, like, are there different ways I could be approaching this? Could I be supporting them better, right? Like, so fast forward a little bit, we were just talking about how you love Vermont and how I love Maine. And we were in Maine on our yearly vacation, and it's lovely. It's off the grid completely, And I was sitting there and I had this kind of like aha moment where I was just, I had been looking at maybe like hiring an ADHD coach to help me better communicate with my kid, right? I was thinking, well, if they can help me figure out some strategies, I can then communicate them to my kid. And I was looking at his website and I thought, well, hang on a minute. Instead of investing in him, why don't I invest in, becoming an ADHD certified coach? And so I went through a year-long program, and I'm always a lifelong learner. And I mean, you can probably relate to this too. It's like the more we learn, the better we are as a coach, because I don't know about you, but I'm always learning. I love it. It makes me feel like I'm progressing, but I'm adding more value, I feel like, because I'm taking the things that I'm learning, I'm taking what works, and I'm sort of infusing that into, the tools and the resources and all of the rest of it that I'm then passing on to the client. Yeah. So that was really my thought of becoming an ADHD coach, was just like, let me just get more tools under my belt. So, and we can talk about this a little bit more maybe, but initially my positioning became leaning into the ADHD coaching. I've since pulled back from that a little bit. And instead of it sort of leading with it, it's like, I'm a business coach for creative entrepreneurs and freelancers. And I have this, additional string to my bow, which is I'm also a certified ADHD coach. So if you happen to be a creative entrepreneur, business owner, freelancer who also has ADHD, you're golden, right? We can address that, or we're going to be taking all of that into account as we're going through the process.
Yeah. It's funny because I was raised as a creative. I went to school for design. I was brought up as a designer. I'm pretty confident in my experience. Most people I've crossed paths with that define themselves as a creative have some level of ADHD. I'm no doctor. I don't even play one on TV, but just the things that I've seen, the things that I've read, people I've observed, it's just kind of how most of us operate. And when we can lean into it as a superpower, as opposed to allow it to be of a detriment and destroy the workday or whatever that thing might be, the results are just amazing. And I'm curious if that's at all part of how you operate and how you work with creative professionals.
Absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up because I really try to look at both sides of the equation. So yes, I want to support the ADHD creative. And to your point about that, I think there's approximately 10% of the general population has an ADHD diagnosis. Of course, that's going to be much higher because a lot of people are not diagnosed, right? But then if we were to look at the subset of creative entrepreneurs and professionals, I have yet to find a number for that, but I would guarantee it's several fold over what the general population is, right? Because it's just, it attracts that type of, like you called it a superpower, and the freedom, right? Like the freedom to be able to build your own thing and to work outside of normal hours and all that stuff. So entrepreneurship is a very appealing option to folks who have ADHD, and it's very understandable to me why. Where it becomes problematic is that, when you're an independent creative, a small business owner, there's a lot of executive function stuff that has to happen. And you're now on your own. You don't have that support. Or if you do have other folks working with you, they may be other creatives. You may not have thought about finding the folks that are going to shore you up without trying to make you be different from who you are, right? So it's interesting. And I personally don't love the whole superpower narrative because I feel like it's gaslighting a little bit because from all of the folks I've worked with and observed, and my own kid included, I just see that it's really, really hard. It provides so many just challenges to getting things done in a world that really values getting things done, that there are elements of it that are absolute superpowers. And I think that there's also so much stuff that makes it very difficult that I want people to accept the whole selves. It's just like, yes, I've got these parts of me that these things that make me brilliant, and I'm brilliant at connecting dots in new and novel ways and abstracting things out. And also I've got limitations that are no fault of my own. They are an outcome of my brain, wiring, and they are problematic sometimes. Right? Those two things can be true. We don't have to pick one or the other. We can say both are true. And how do we now work with that? Because the thing that I see that I so want to change from both sides, I want to help the neurodivergent individual divest from the message that you're broken, that something is wrong, like you're a flake, all of these things, you can't be relied upon, whatever, all of that stuff that they've internalized quite understandably because that's what they've been told. But I also want to, as a neurotypical person, speak to the neurotypical managers and co-workers and team leaders and say, you have to do better too, just in the same way that I had to do better. And you can't just try and push somebody to do things your way because you think it's the right way, right? So, and it's actually interesting, I've never made this connection before, but just as I said before, I was a middle person between the creative and the company when I was an agent. I feel like I'm kind of in that role now. I think it's a natural place for me to be, where I can say, I'm for the neurodivergent, but I don't want to say to them, it's on you to be better so you can fit into this world. I want to say, I want to help you do as well as you can do because it just feels better to do well. And And I want to talk to the other side and say, we can figure out ways where you can do better too, and you can accommodate different types of folks. So everyone's moving forward, but it's not all going to be cookie cutter, and it's going to be uncomfortable for you. And you're going to have to recognize your own ableism and biases and all of the ways in which we're unkind. That I think that people are aware of in other areas of their life, but they're not aware of it in how they treat neurodivergent people. And I speak as a person who often found herself speaking to her own child in a kind of frustrated way. It's just like, get your shoes on, like it can bring out an unkind element. And I think that that's something that like none of us wants to think of ourselves as unkind.
It's so crazy to hear you think of, like, compare it to, so my now 18-year-old son also grew up and still has ADHD and had something else I can't remember what it was called, but we would build out flashcards in the bathroom of steps he had to take to brush his teeth and put on his shoes and get dressed. And you can't say to a kid like that, go in your room and clean your room. First thing they see, they're distracted by, and then parents are upset or we're late for the whatever. And so we also got reprogrammed as parents through a counselor to how to parent differently. But to think about that in the workplace of, I have this talented team, they're missing deadlines because they're playing with, Midjourney, and they're not, doing the work they're supposed to be doing. And how do I better guide them? The frustration that the team must feel, or any players of the team that struggle with ADHD or anything else of that nature, feeling it from management or from ownership. And so the role that you're talking about is, I'm in the middle trying to help them communicate better and find that common ground or middle ground of let them work in the morning because that's their better time of the day, or let them work in the evening or whatever. I mean, are you actively coaching leadership on how to, better work with their team in these places?
Not as yet, but I would like to. That's somewhere where I feel I could really see an opportunity where I can see both sides. Just in the same way that I was able to in the past. And that's something where I just feel like it's an untapped opportunity, because I don't see a lot of people doing that. I think I see most people saying, this person's problematic, let's get them some coaching. Let's get them to fix this stuff. And so they can come back and just work better with the team. And, one of the things I think I have to sort of remind myself of, and of my kid is, you're never going to not have ADHD. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way to make this better. And I say that with air quotes. Right. It's more of a how do I work with, my unique, brain and the ways of processing and the ways of functioning and communicating and all of the things that it impacts. And how do I then take the ownership of that and then tell other people how I need to be treated? And I think that's the key. We don't create a space where someone can say, this is how you get the best out of me. So first of all, the person themselves doesn't know how to get the best out of them, because they've just been told, be normal, be better, be normal. And then, they're not given the space and the permission and to be empowered to say, this is how you work best with me. Right. I mean, I'm dealing with this with my kid now. It's like he really is pushing back against the accommodations he has at school. And I say to him, my God, take them. What a gift to have people who see you and meet you where you are. It's just a modification. If you have a different processing speed to someone else, that's not a different intelligence level. Right. It's processing, not intelligence. But they
don't want to feel different or cast out or and so there's a lot of masking that goes on as well, right? And then let's not even get started on yes, we can get started on if you want to, but women with ADHD and how that shows up differently, and how women are treated in the workplace and how they tend to mask more. So it's such a sort of a tangle in a way sometimes, but I think we can all do better. I 100% agree. And how you mentioned, we don't provide them the space to communicate. I'm thinking about like review processes and things like that, but just on a normal day to day, like here's what I need. And it doesn't need to be here in New Jersey. What do they call the school program, like the 504 or something like that? Or
IEP. Yeah.
Yeah. IEP. It doesn't need to be that, but how can we encourage leadership and management to literally have an open door policy where somebody can advocate for themselves or be seen in a way that they're given, the accountability that they need.
Yeah. Even, I mean, the way I envision it is like, when you're training teammates as well, I've just been like, be aware of who you're working with, right? Mm-hmm. So if you see someone, one of your coworkers, and you see that they struggle in meetings, because most folks with ADHD cannot sit through these meetings and hold their focus. It's just not conducive to them. So why then do you not have someone who is like note taker extraordinaire, doesn't miss a beat? Why is that person not in the meeting, taking the notes and then sharing them with the person afterwards?
I'll tell you, I have a client who struggles with this, and they started using one of the AI meeting recording tools. And at the end, and they said to me, I'm not going to sit and read through an hour of notes, but this tool gives me a synopsis and it gives me action items. And so I can sit there and doodle. And while I'm doodling, I'm paying attention, but I'm not taking, and it was a game changer for them. So
absolutely. But then, that the doodling is not seen as that person being disrespectful or that person being rude or that person being distracted. Like that's something that like helps that person to focus, right?
That was me all growing up through school, through Hebrew school. I doodled my entire, life away. And I was told, you're not paying attention. This is the only way I can pay attention. So
exactly. So, exactly what that struggle is. And so there's a lot of, just bias about, what it means to be doing a good job. Right.
Do you think performances? I'm sorry. Say that again.
No, I was thinking even just in terms of like, so, if we were thinking about accommodations for work too, like the kids have in school, right? Yeah. If we know that someone who has ADHD, one of the superpowers, if you like, is the hyperfocus, right? But they've got to be interested in the topic. Yeah. So don't force them to do timesheets. Have them hyper-focus on the problem solving where they are brilliant and they can literally go away and sit for 3 hours in a room on their own with their headphones on, not being bothered.
Yeah.
Right? So these are like small changes that don't cost any money, right? Where you're getting the most out of the person. You're not asking them to do the thing which is just like pushing a boulder up a hill to them. Don't ask them to do a timesheet. They'll never do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because their brain literally won't allow them to do it because it's just too damn boring.
That's interesting. Yeah. I'm just thinking of all the people I've seen push back on timesheets. Has that been the reason? And even clients now that I talk to that I try and work with of the team won't do timesheets. Is that the reason? I don't know. Yeah. I hadn't even dawned on me.
Exactly. And whenever, and sometimes my husband will, he's a product manager and he'll be talking about a meeting he was in or something else or, a tricky interaction. And my question is always just like, I wonder if this is hard for them because of like, my thought is always now, I wonder if there's some neurodivergence at play. Yeah. Because if someone's like acting or behaving or communicating in a way that you're just like, you don't quite understand, my question would always be like, I wonder if, and this is not about labeling people or asking people or any of that stuff, but it's just, even just that one, I wonder if question sort of just opens our mind up and puts us in their shoes for a minute, right? What is making this so hard for them? Like no one wants to be an a-hole who's just like, I'm not going to do timesheets because they're stupid. You know what I mean?
And on the other side, the boss doesn't want to be the a-hole either. It's like, you have to do this or you're out or whatever. So yeah. I'm curious if you have like, and not a listicle, I don't want to do that, but like, what are a couple of things from a leadership standpoint that owners can either be looking for or put in place that would help open those lines of communication or support their team better, things like that?
I think, even just, setting the tone, because, anytime you're meeting a new hire or something else, you have the opportunity to set the sort of the tone of the culture, like the relationship, like this is how we roll in this team. Right. And so even then I've just been like, listen, I want to make sure that you thrive here. That's my job. So when I work with a new client, for example, I will always start out and say, I have no preconceived idea of what your right business looks like for you. My job is to meet you where you are. We've got a structure, we've got a framework, but this is not a prescription. My job is to meet you where you are and move you forward from that place, whatever that looks like. And even just that sort of framing of just like, my job as your manager or team lead or whatever it is to meet you where you are so that we can figure out what you need to thrive and to contribute most fully to this team.
Yeah.
What do I need to know about what makes work good and easy for you? Even just a question like that. What do I need to know? How do you work best? Do you prefer, are there ways that you process information differently? Are you a visual processor? A lot of times, folks with ADHD will be visual processors or verbal processors, right? And so auditory can be difficult, right? Like hearing this and then translating it, that can be a challenging one. So if you know that that's a challenge, why the heck would you make someone sit in a meeting where it's really contingent on them actually picking up and hearing all of these things to what the next action steps are?
Yeah.
So even just say, do you know of any obstacles that, make it harder for you to work on a project?
Yeah.
Right? Are there any environmental situations that are better for you? Environment design, do you do better in a group? Do you do better with quiet? Do you need, so I think really asking them.
Yeah.
Is always going to be, because as when I was doing my coach training program, as my mentor said to me, when you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. Everybody's is different.
Yeah.
Right. And there's also a lot of, coexistence with autism and all kinds of other things. So, the neurological things. So
how do you see, if any, the shift to more of a remote workforce in the creative space being impacted or impacting people with ADHD? Is it helping? Is it hurting? Is it helping or hurting individuals or businesses?
So I would say, if we're using the same premise that you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD, everyone's experience will be different. So I've heard kind of across the range, but for many folks, I have heard that it's been great for them because they have the security of an environment that they've created for themselves, right? So that's already set up. They're not having to, move into different social situations and sort of adapt very quickly. They can plan their own day. A lot of times they can work at different hours.
Right.
I think for some people being on Zoom meetings is difficult. That can be hard. And for some folks, the isolation is going to be a bit of a kicker too. I mean, I think personally, the whole hybrid option is genius because it kind of just gives people opportunity to be able to get the best of both worlds. But
and do
I would
what works
say
best for them.
Exactly. And so, I think that there's been, people have, I think I've heard a lot of employers and, they want everyone back in the office because they think that's the right thing. And it's just not necessarily. Look at the data.
Yeah.
And again, it's challenging our assumptions, right, about what works best. But I think giving people options is fantastic. My husband didn't go back to work after in an office. He went remote at the pandemic and then worked for companies that were all remote anyway. It's great for having the diversity of talent. You're not limited to, especially if you're in New York or something where it's a lot more expensive. So I think it's kind of been great from what I've been hearing. People have that flexibility that enables them to manage the stimulation levels themselves.
Yeah. I would agree. I think that people can work how they work best and where they work best and when they work best. And I think so long as leadership is supportive of that by saying, you need an extra screen? Cool. We'll send you an extra screen to your house. Yeah. Or you need a stand-up desk so you can fidget? Cool. We'll send you a fidgety desk, whatever you need, those kinds of things. So yeah. And I also agree. I think productivity has been, let's say through the roof, but certainly far better than previously. And there are those owners or managers that are like, well, if I can't see you in the cube farm, how do I know you're actually working? And I think that there's a legacy mindset that needs to kind of get, more forward thought on that.
Agreed. And also to that point, what I would say to them is like, that's your problem.
Yeah.
You need to figure out how to feel better about that yourself then, because why should someone have to be there for you to see? So you can police them, like their hours. And also, if they're getting the work done, who cares if it's 2 a.m?
Exactly.
Why is there a judgment on that, right?
Yeah. This is amazing. I love it. I want to jump to a couple of real quick rapid fire questions because they're always fun. So wherever this leads you, but what's something that you can't get enough of these days? A hobby, a book, a show, or whatever?
Oh, gosh. You know what? I bought an Instant Pot for Christmas, and I've always cooked, but when you have a family and cooking becomes like your job, it becomes less fun. But it's just kind of like reinvigorated my love for cooking again, because I have to think differently about it. It's like a different medium. So it kind of challenged everything. Wow. I wasn't like falling into the same old ruts, and I'm cooking kind of like healthier food. And I mean, I always kind of cook pretty healthy, but somehow like the shift of medium kind of broke apart this rut that I was in. And so I'm kind of digging that now, because it's that time of year, it's January, no one's really doing that much. So I'm sort of kind of cozy and cooking and trying lots of different things in there and enjoying that weirdly.
I've never heard of Instant Pot described as like making you need to rethink it, but that's so interesting as far as, what kind of food meals you can prepare and when and how. And
Yeah, I was just super bored with my repertoire. And so it's just forcing me to operate differently, which has kind of been refreshing.
Fabulous. I'm sure the family's happy about that. So that might also answer the next question. So we'll say that answer can't apply to this next question, but what's a tool that you recently integrated into your life, digital, physical, business, personal, whatever, that you look back and you think to yourself, how did I live without this tool before?
A tool. I don't think it's a tool so much. I think it's more environment that's kind of like moving the needle for me right now. So for example, we moved into a house that was like a 1930s house 8 years ago. It had the most awful kitchen. A couple of years ago, we redid the kitchen. It's not just it looks much more beautiful now, but it was reconfigured in a way that is so user-friendly and so conducive to family dinners. And it's beautiful. And now we're redoing both of our bathrooms because we had to. They were like original 1930s bathrooms that were just like leaking through the roof and stuff. And so we're doing that. And it kind of like opened my mind to like just our environment and how that makes you feel and how upgrading things that are okay, like they work, although the bathrooms were starting to stop working. But, it still has a huge impact. And so I think I'm more sensitive to, rather than another tool or technology, it's just like, how do I be more present and taken care of in my everyday life and environment and connection and experiences? And how do we create spaces that are conducive to the things that actually matter to me? I don't need to be more productive, but I do need more connection. Or I do need to lighten up sometimes when it comes to like kids' bedrooms or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh, so I love that. I mean, you're defining architecture in its core essence of kind of create a space that brings family together or brings in more light or whatever that thing is. And the way that you describe it is just really like it can feel the desire for love and connection in your home. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Finally, what is an invaluable piece of business advice or experience in business that you've had that you want to share with listeners?
I think it was, and this came when I was a rep. I used to represent a guy who was a curator and did pop-ups, and so they were events that were produced, and we had a production director who was great. And I remember him saying to me once, "The only thing you can guarantee in production is that something will go horribly wrong at the 11th hour, and you're gonna have to fix it." And the client doesn't care about problems; they care about solutions. And that was something that I just really took to heart, is that like so often we lead with our own concerns, gripes, problems, things. Whereas, when we're either trying to be of service or just be like a happy human to be around, focus on the solution. You don't need to tell everyone the problem. You don't need to get everyone to buy into like how bad it all is and gosh, shouldn't we all just run around and lose our heads right now? What about thinking about solutions or, where you're going, or putting the client at the center of your thought about something? And so it was just a way. And, when I work with clients, we talk about this a lot. It's just like so often we lead with, here are our capabilities, especially agencies. These are our capabilities. This is what we can do for you. Here's our projects. Here are our case studies. Whereas, when you can center the person you're speaking to in your messaging and make it all about them, and what you say about yourself is only how you support them in the very specific struggles that they have that you're uniquely qualified to support them in, it's kind of a game changer. So I think that was, I don't think he meant it to be received that way, but that's how I received it.
I love that. And as a guy that had an agency that did massive events, I can fully attest to that as absolute fact. 11th hour, something's going to happen. Be prepared. Clients don't care what the excuses are. Get it done. Yeah. Absolutely. Amazing. Justine, thank you so much for your time, your experience, all the insight that you shared. I think it's super valuable. So I'm very grateful for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. I had such a good time. I could have talked forever with you. We'll
have to do a second episode then.
Let's do it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bites. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.